There is a peculiar kind of wound that never seems to heal cleanly. It is not the sharp pain of betrayal that screams in the dark of night, but the dull, persistent ache of being invalidated, of being hurt, and then watching the one who harmed you pretend it never happened. This experience can make you question your own memory, your own heart, your own worth. You replay every conversation, searching for proof that your pain was real. You start to wonder if you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too needy, and in that confusion, you lose something precious, trust in your own perception. One of the most bewildering and painful experiences we encounter in relationships is the moment we realize that someone has hurt us deeply and yet seems to carry on as if nothing ever happened. It feels as though your reality has been split in two. On one side, there is your vivid memory of the wound, and on the other, their uncanny ability to act like it never occurred. The confusion this creates is not accidental. It is the inevitable result of something ancient and unconscious. Denial as self-protection. Denial is often misunderstood. People assume it is always a deliberate choice, as if the person who harmed you sat down and decided, I will pretend this never happened. But in truth, denial emerges instinctively, almost like the body's reflex to pull away from pain. It is the psyche's way of preserving the fragile sense of self when shame feels too dangerous to face. Consider a child who grew up in an environment where errors were met not with understanding but with harsh criticism or even ridicule. When this child made a mistake, the adults around them did not teach them how to repair, how to apologize, or how to hold the discomfort of remorse. Instead, the child learned that mistakes equal unworthiness, that to be imperfect was to be undeserving of love. So the child developed a secret strategy. If I pretend nothing happened, maybe the pain will go away. Maybe I won't be punished. Decades later, this child grows into an adult who has never learned how to reconcile care with accountability. When they hurt someone, they feel the same primitive dread they once felt in childhood. I must not be good. I must not be lovable. Rather than face this intolerable shame, their mind quickly buries the memory. The act of denial becomes so habitual, so reflexive, that it no longer feels like a choice. It feels like truth. I remember working with someone who described this pattern in her marriage. Her husband would, in moments of stress, unleash torrents of criticism. He would accuse her of being lazy, of never appreciating him, of failing as a partner. These words cut her to her core. But the next day, he would wake up, make coffee, and act as if nothing happened. When she tried to revisit the conversation, he would look genuinely puzzled. You're overreacting, he'd say. I didn't mean anything by it. To her, this felt like gaslighting. To him, it felt like normal life. When we do not have the courage or the capacity to look at our own darkness, we learn to hide from it. Denial becomes a protective wall that shields us from the awareness of how much harm we have caused. This wall doesn't only keep out guilt, it also keeps out intimacy. Because true closeness requires two people to stand in the full reality of their actions. It requires the humility to say, I see what I did, and I am sorry. Without this reckoning, no repair can occur. This is why so many people remain stuck in cycles of conflict. One person tries desperately to name the pain, to process it together, to find resolution. The other retreats behind the barricade of denial. The more one partner insists on truth, the more the other clings to the fantasy that everything is fine. The result is a maddening stalemate. One side grows increasingly desperate for validation, while the other becomes more entrenched in avoidance. And here is where self-doubt creeps in. And it's an invincible problem in our continuous fight over when your lived experience is met with blank stares and dismissive shrugs, you begin to question your own perception. Was I too sensitive? Did I exaggerate? Maybe it wasn't that bad. This self-interrogation can go on for years, hollowing out your sense of self. You learn to mistrust your own instincts in favor of someone else's comfort. But the truth is this: denial does not erase reality. it simply obscures it. Just because the person who harmed you cannot or will not acknowledge it does not mean the injury didn't occur. Your memory is not defective simply because it makes someone else uncomfortable. One of the most powerful things you can do when faced with denial is to reclaim your right to your own reality. To say, "This happened, I remember it, I feel it in my body. I do not need your permission to name it." This act of self-correction is not about vengeance or punishment. It is about liberation, because when you stop waiting for the person who hurt you to validate your experience, you free yourself from the cycle of seeking what they are not capable of giving. It is also important to understand that denial is often rooted in profound fear. The person who pretends nothing happened is not simply cruel, they are terrified. They fear that acknowledging harm will unravel their carefully constructed image of themselves as good and blameless. They fear that if they look too closely at their actions, they will be swallowed by shame. So they shut their eyes, convinced that blindness equals innocence. But blindness is not innocence, it is avoidance. And avoidance is the silent accomplice of harm. You do not have to participate in someone else's avoidance. You do not have to pretend everything is fine to keep the peace. The peace you keep by denying your truth is a prison, not a sanctuary. When you understand denial as self-protection, you may feel compassion for the person who uses it, but compassion does not mean you have to stay entangled in their unacknowledged patterns. It means you can see them clearly while still honoring yourself. It means you can hold space for their fear without sacrificing your reality. The path to healing is not paved by waiting for someone else to admit the truth. It is paved by standing firmly in your own. To do this is an act of courage. To do this is an act of self-respect. And to do this is to reclaim the wholeness that was never lost, only obscured by someone else's refusal to look. At the very heart of this pattern, people hurting you and then behaving as if nothing happened, is not merely denial. It is a profound emotional immaturity that stems from an undeveloped capacity for intimacy. Many people imagine that intimacy is only about affection or desire, about shared experiences and laughter. But genuine intimacy demands something far more challenging: the ability to hold space for another person's pain, especially when you are the cause of it. True intimacy requires us to confront the tension between two truths: I care about you and I have hurt you. In my personal system, my system is that my faith is a moral core to me, and I have a very strong faith culture. So when my system fails in that way, I have a burning desire to rescue another. That tension is uncomfortable. It provokes guilt, remorse, and even shame. Yet, the ability to tolerate that discomfort is the mark of maturity. Without it, relationships become superficial, unable to withstand the reality of imperfection. For some individuals, this capacity was never nurtured. Perhaps they were raised in families where vulnerability was a liability, where admitting wrongdoing invited ridicule, rage, or rejection. Maybe they learned that the safest way to exist was to keep their emotional world barricaded behind walls of defensiveness. Over time, this defense hardened into a reflex. Any confrontation, any moment of accountability began to feel like a threat rather than an invitation to grow. You can see this immaturity in how they react when you try to address the harm they've caused. You come to them earnestly, perhaps with trembling hands and a voice full of sorrow. You tell them, "This hurt me," but instead of softening, they tense. Instead of listening, they deflect. Instead of acknowledging, they attack or withdraw. They might say, "You're too sensitive," or "Why can't you just let things go?" Some will even turn the tables and accuse you of creating drama. This reaction has nothing to do with your worth or the validity of your feelings. It is about their inability to carry the weight of shared humanity, the knowledge that all of us, no matter how well-intentioned, are capable of causing pain. I recall a story shared by a woman whose partner consistently minimized her feelings, Whenever she tried to explain how his sarcastic comments humiliated her in front of their friends, he would respond with a condescending laugh and say, "You're overthinking everything. You need to lighten up." Over time, she stopped sharing her pain. She learned that vulnerability would be met not with understanding but dismissal. And in the quiet of her own heart, she began to believe his words, that she was simply too sensitive too much. What she didn't realize then was that his refusal to acknowledge her hurt was never a reflection of her inadequacy. It was a reflection of his own fear of intimacy, his inability to sit with the reality of having hurt someone he claimed to love. This is a difficult truth. Some people remain emotionally stunted well into adulthood. They might be skilled in their careers, admired in their communities, or charming at dinner parties, but when it comes to owning their impact on others, they are like children pretending the broken vase never fell from their hands. The fantasy of innocence is easier to maintain than the humility of repair. This is why your attempts to process the hurt together can feel like trying to speak to someone in a language they have never learned. You are offering an opportunity to deepen the relationship, but they experience it as an attack. They cannot tolerate the discomfort of seeing themselves in an unflattering light, so they retreat to the safety of denial and deflection. In this place, no true connection can grow, because real connection requires that both people are willing to look at the whole picture, including the shadows. If you have found yourself in this cycle, you may have wondered if you were asking too much. You may have questioned whether expecting accountability was unreasonable. Let me assure you, it is not unreasonable to want your experiences acknowledged. It is not needy to desire repair. In fact, these are the hallmarks of a healthy, mature relationship. It is only in environments of emotional immaturity that such basic needs are made to feel excessive. Emotional immaturity thrives on avoidance. It needs you to silence yourself so that the fragile illusion of harmony can be preserved. But that harmony is an illusion. It is a brittle piece that fractures the moment truth dares to enter the room. When you agree to pretend nothing happened, you are not protecting the relationship. You are protecting their fear at the cost of your own authenticity. It is often said that intimacy is not measured by how we behave when everything is easy, but by how we respond when we have caused harm. Do we shrink, lash out, deny, or do we stay, listen, and repair? This is the crossroads where emotional maturity is revealed. There is no shame in recognizing that someone you care about may not have the capacity to meet you in this space. It doesn't make them a monster. It makes them human and unfinished in their growth. But it also means that you have a choice. You can continue to diminish your own needs to preserve their comfort, or you can honor your truth and require the kind of relationship where your feelings are not only heard, but held with respect. When you begin to see emotional immaturity for what it is, a fear of intimacy, a fear of facing oneself, you stop taking it so personally. You realize that their inability to engage with your pain does not diminish its reality, and you start to understand that real love is never sustained by pretending, by tiptoeing, or by self-abandonment. Real love is forged in the fire of truth, where two people can say, "I see you fully, and I am still here." If that willingness is absent, it is not your job to carry the relationship alone. You deserve reciprocity, you deserve accountability, and you deserve to be met in the fullness of your humanity, not just the parts that are easy to love. One of the most confounding aspects of being hurt by someone who then acts as though nothing happened is the way this behavior can erode your very sense of reality. It is not only that they deny or dismiss what occurred, it is that their refusal to engage with it can make you question whether it happened at all. This is how the slow corrosion of self-trust begins, often so suddenly you don't see it happening until you feel hollowed out from the inside. This process is sometimes described as a form of gaslighting, but it is more than that. It is an attempt, conscious or unconscious, to impose their version of reality over yours. The unspoken message is clear. If you want my love or my acceptance, you must surrender your memory, your feelings, and your truth. Over time, this demand is corrosive, not only to your confidence, but to your core identity. Consider how this unfolds in everyday life. Imagine you have finally mustered the courage to say, "When you spoke to me that way, it made me feel worthless." You expect some recognition of your pain. Instead, you are met with a blank stare or a casual shrug. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're exaggerating." In that moment, your nervous system lights up with alarm. You feel the dissonance between what you experienced and what you're being told. But if this happens enough times, you start to wonder if you really are too sensitive, too emotional, too much. Many people spend years trapped in this fog. They tell themselves that peace is preferable to conflict, that perhaps they truly do remember wrong. They rationalize and downplay until their inner voice grows weak. But the truth is, you are not crazy for remembering what happened. You are not defective for feeling hurt. The confusion you feel is not proof that your perception is wrong. It is proof that your integrity is fighting to survive in an environment that denies it oxygen. What is rarely acknowledged is that this pattern, hurting you and then pretending nothing happened, can serve a hidden purpose. When someone refuses to acknowledge your pain, it allows them to preserve a position of control. If they can convince you that the wound does not exist, they never have to do the work of self-examination or risk feeling shame or face the consequences of their actions. Your confusion becomes their shelter. This is why your attempts to seek clarity or resolution often feel fruitless. You may spend hours trying to explain how you feel, believing that if you can just find the right words, they will finally see. But someone who has built their sense of safety around never admitting fault cannot receive your truth. They may nod and smile, or even say the words, "I'm sorry," but if their actions don't change, you are not dealing with genuine accountability. You are witnessing the performance of contrition without the substance of it. I once listened to a man who described years of this pattern with his father. Every time he tried to talk about the way his father's explosive anger affected him, he was met with dismissive jokes. "You know I didn't mean it," or "You're too sensitive, son." Over time, he began to feel as though his own memories were unreliable. He would replay the past in his mind, questioning every detail. Only when he began to share his story in a trusted circle did he hear other voices affirming that no, he was not imagining things. The harm was real, and it was not his fault. This is what makes this dynamic so damaging. It isolates you from the very resources you need to heal. You may feel too ashamed to talk to others, fearing they will agree with the person who hurt you. You may keep the secret for years, all the while carrying the heavy burden of unacknowledged pain. If you see yourself in this, know this: you are not alone. The most courageous thing you can do is to reclaim the authority of your own perception, to say to yourself, "Even if no one else believes me, I will believe myself." This is the first step in restoring your wholeness. Because when you affirm your own reality, you begin to heal the rupture that denial creates inside you. It is important to remember that people who persist in this behavior often lack the self-awareness to change without extraordinary effort. They may have learned early on that vulnerability is dangerous, that admitting fault is intolerable. These patterns can be deeply ingrained, but their inability to acknowledge what they did does not absolve them, and it certainly does not mean you must pretend it didn't happen. Many times you will hear advice about having compassion for those who cannot face their own darkness. And yes, compassion can help you let go of bitterness, but compassion does not mean you must excuse or enable. It does not mean you must stay in relationships where your reality is constantly undermined. You can feel compassion and still choose distance. You can wish them well and still protect your peace. Rebuilding trust in yourself after this kind of experience takes time. You will need to practice listening to your instincts again. You will need to find spaces where your feelings are received with respect. You will need to remind yourself that your sensitivity is not a flaw. but a form of intelligence. Your system's way of telling you when something is not safe. When someone hurts you and acts like nothing happened, it is not only an act of denial, it is an act that demands your complicity. They are asking you to abandon yourself so they can remain comfortable. And the most liberating choice you can make is to refuse. You do not have to make yourself small to preserve someone else's illusions. You do not have to betray your own memory to keep the peace. You do not have to carry shame that does not belong to you. In the end, healing is not about making them see. It is about seeing yourself clearly. It is about standing firmly in your own experience, even when others would prefer you look away. This is how you reclaim your reality. This is how you return to yourself. When you begin to understand why some people hurt you and then pretend nothing happened, you reclaim something essential: your own clarity. You stop blaming yourself for other people's refusal to grow. You stop carrying the burden of their denial. You learn to trust the intelligence of your pain instead of dismissing it. And in that trust, you become anchored to something far stronger than the illusions others try to impose on you. Remember, your ability to feel deeply, to question, to seek understanding, these are not weaknesses. They are signs that your spirit refuses to live in a world of falsehoods. While others may choose the safety of denial, you have the courage to stand in the light of what is real. You have the strength to say, "This happened, it matters, and I matter." Do not allow anyone's fear of accountability to distort your perception. Do not surrender your reality for the comfort of those who have not yet learned to honor it. You were never too sensitive, too much, or too difficult. You were simply unwilling to betray your own soul for the sake of someone else's unexamined conscience. As you walk forward, hold fast to this truth. You are worthy of relationships where your feelings are valued, your experiences are seen, and your boundaries are respected. You are worthy of connections grounded in honesty, not pretense. May you continue to trust your own perception and honor the wisdom that rises from within you. And you continue to trust your own perception and honor the wisdom that rises from within you. May you find the courage to choose yourself, even when it means walking away. And may you always remember that your truth, no matter how inconvenient it is for others, is the foundation upon which your freedom will be built. And we are out. We are out. We are out of here. This has been fantastic. May you find the courage to choose yourself, even when it means walking away. And may you find the courage to choose yourself, even when it's built for you.